Good evening. Welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Shannon Browning-Mullis. I'm the Executive Director of the Juliette Gordon Low Birthplace, and I am delighted that you're here. At the Birthplace, it is our mission to learn about and teach about the women who changed the past, to inspire the girls that are going to change the future. And that's pretty amazing. We literally get to come here and do that every day, and we're really excited about it. So a big part of that is thinking about what Juliette did, but also what the women around her did, and the causes they fought for during the Progressive Era. And of course, one of the most important ones was the vote for women. And so we're exploring that through our two-part series, first tonight, and then please mark your calendars for February 16th in partnership with the League of Women Voters of Coastal Georgia. We are going to be hosting a party to celebrate the vote. So we think it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have activities and refreshments and entertainment, and we're just going to think about voting, which is going to be pretty amazing. So we're able to bring this kind of programming to you because of the support of the Circle of Friends. So if you are not a member of our Circle of Friends and you think programming about women's history is important, we invite you to join us. You can talk to Kristen at our reception after, or you can go on our website to do so. We really appreciate it. For tonight's program, I am delighted to introduce Kimberly Wallner. She is the Executive Vice President of the Women's Suffrage National Monument Foundation. She's a veteran coalition builder with a distinguished career in Washington, and before her current role, she served as Director of Programs and Partnerships for the Women's Suffrage Centennial Commission, and she led the national effort to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. Her deep expertise in strategic partnerships was forged through years of service in high-level nonprofit and government positions. Today, she is at the forefront of the mission to ensure women's history finally takes its rightful place on the National Mall. Welcome, Kimberly.
Hi there. Thank you for that kind introduction. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you to Elizabeth for the tour earlier of the house. It is a profound honor to be here today. And as I was walking through the house, I still feel like the air still seems to carry an energy, and I can tell it was a woman who refused to believe in the word impossible. To be in the birthplace of Juliette Daisy Gordon Low is to be in the birthplace of a particular kind of American leadership, one that is rooted in friendship, refined by service, and defined by an unwavering belief in the potential of women. Daisy often spoke of a magic thread that could link us all together. Today, as we sit within these historic walls, that thread stretches hundreds of miles away to another historic site, a quiet, hollowed stretch of land in our nation's capital known as Constitution Gardens. It is there on the National Mall that we will build the Women's Suffrage National Monument. There are many threads that connect this house in Savannah to that site in Washington, threads woven from the values of persistence, civic duty, and the power of women working together. We often think of Juliette Gordon Low as a singular figure, a bolt of lightning that struck Savannah in 1912. But Daisy was the center of a vibrant, deeply motivated circle of friends. She understood that while one woman can make a statement, a circle of women can make a difference. Among them were women who were not only fighting for the future of the American girl, but for the fundamental rights of the American woman. Daisy lived at a time when the world was shifting, and she was positioned at the very heart of that shift. She was close friends with icons like Dr. Anna Howard Shaw, the president of the National American Women's Suffrage Association. And these women weren't just social acquaintances. They were co-conspirators in the reimagining of what a woman could be. We often think of Daisy's leadership as being centered in the parlor, but its true heart was in the woods. In 1912, the world expected a girl to be fragile, stationary, and sheltered. It expected her to be dependent, to wait for assistance if a path was lost or a crisis arose. Daisy's response was to hand her a compass and lead her into the Georgia wilderness. She understood that if you could teach a girl to build a fire in the rain or to navigate a forest using only the stars, you were doing more than teaching her woodcraft. You were teaching her that she could trust her own judgment. She was teaching her that she could be the master of her own environment. In an era when women were told to wait for rescue, Daisy taught them to be their own rescuers. By learning to fix a motor, render first aid, or signal with flags, a girl was practicing a form of personal sovereignty. This was the bridge that carried her out of the sheltered parlor and into the public square. Daisy knew that you cannot claim your place in a changing world if you have not first learned how to rely on yourself. This was the same brand of courage being displayed by the suffragists in Washington. While Daisy was leading girls on hikes and bloomers, an act that was considered scandalous at the time, the suffragists were organizing cross-country automobile tours and massive parades, physically claiming the streets and highways for themselves. They weren't waiting for the right of vote to be granted to them. They were navigating their way toward it. Both movements were built on the idea that women and girls should not just be passengers in American life, but navigators of it. Daisy was a master of the long game from everything I've read. She understood that to change the world for American girls, she had to be a master of the very social rules she was preparing them to eventually transcend. She wasn't looking for a shortcut. She was scouting the safest, most sustainable path forward. We see this tension in the story of Mildred Cunningham, who was vice president of the Equal Suffrage Party of Georgia. Mildred repeatedly lobbied Daisy for an official endorsement for the vote. Mildred saw the Scouts as a natural army for the suffrage cause, a generation of girls already trained in the discipline and grit that the movement required. And I think Daisy's response was a masterclass in strategic focus. She sent Mildred a pamphlet reinforcing that her movement was non-sectarian and non-political. I don't think she was being timid. I think she was being protective. She knew that if she tied the Girl Scouts too early to the political fire of the suffrage movement, the doors of Southern homes may slam shut. She was protecting that magic thread before it was strong enough to pull the weight of a national debate. She knew that while the suffragists were clearing the road to the voting booth, her job was to make sure that the women walking that road knew exactly how to lead once they arrived. She wasn't just pointing toward a destination, she was giving them the tools to navigate the journey themselves. This parallel track is incredibly clear if we look at the evolution of the Girl Scout handbook between 1912 and 1920. It is the story of a movement moving women out of the private parlor and into the public square. In the first 1913 handbook, civics was almost non-existent. A girl had to know the mayor's name and how to fold a flag. But Daisy was already planting seeds of independence. By 1916, as the suffrage movement gained steam and the Silent Sentinels began picketing the White House, a new civics badge appeared. Without explicitly emphasizing which citizens were not granted voting rights, it required a scout to state the chief requirements of a voter in her state. If you think about that, Daisy was teaching girls the mechanics of a system that they were still legally locked out of. She was giving them the keys to a kingdom that they didn't yet own. While Daisy was training these young leaders in Savannah, her co-conspirators, as I call them, in Washington, were engaged in a 72-year war of attrition. This is the story we're bringing to the National Mall. When we talk about the Women's Suffrage National Monument, we're talking about more than just a statue. We are talking about the first monument dedicated to American women's history on the National Mall. For over a century, the story of this struggle, the largest expansion of democracy in our country's history, has been a missing chapter from the nation's front yard. And to best tell this story, we have fought for and won a 2.5-acre site in Constitution Gardens, which we can talk later, but this 2.5 acres right here will be the site. So not a small story we're about to tell. If you walk that stretch of the mall today, you're walking through the very DNA of our country. When you look to the left, right here, you will see the Washington Monument, piercing the sky to celebrate the foundation of our country. When you would look to the right, you see the Lincoln Memorial, where we remember the struggle for the Union. So we truly believe, as we looked about where to best locate this site, it isn't just about geography, it is about geometry. It's about placing the story of women's suffrage at the very heart of the American story of liberty. The suffragists were the first people to ever picket the White House. They stood in the rain, the snow, and the heat. They were insulted, spat upon, and eventually imprisoned. And they understood that liberty isn't a gift that is handed down. It is a foundation that must be built inch by inch and generation by generation. They knew that they may not see the finish line themselves, but they kept walking so that we would. By 1920, the shift in the Girl Scout curriculum was complete. Daisy had retired as president, turning over the copyright of the handbook to the organization she had so carefully built. And this allowed a new generation of leaders to step forward, including Gertrude Brown, a prominent suffragist who designed the new citizen badge. The requirements for this badge addressed girls directly as future voters with political influence. They were encouraged to study the history of the women's movement in America, not to be told how to vote, but to ensure they understood the mechanics of and weight of the franchise they were about to inherit. This was the moment that the magic thread was tied in a knot. A girl who learned to hike in bloomers was now a woman who knew how to read a ballot. However, this transformation wasn't easy and it wasn't equal for everyone. And we must be honest about our history if we are to honor it. We must remember leaders like Mamie George Williams here in Savannah. In 1920, while the 19th Amendment was being ratified, Mamie was leading the Savannah Federation of Negro Women's Clubs to register Black voters against incredible odds. For women of color, the 19th Amendment was not the end of a race. It was merely a new stepping stone. Mamie George Williams wasn't celebrating a victory in 1920. She was honoring a duty. She proved that the work of democracy isn't finished when a law is signed. It is only just beginning in the hands of the women who have the courage to claim it. Our monument on the Mall will tell her story too, reminding us that the magic thread of liberty is only as strong as the women who refuse to let it break. This brings us to our mission today. As we look toward the future, we carry the philosophy of Nina Pape, who was not only a visionary educator, but also Daisy's cousin and co-founder. The belief that we must teach girls how to think, not what to think. A monument shouldn't be a destination you only go look at the past. It should also be a laboratory where you go think about the future. We need to actively engage Americans at every age group, from the youngest daisies to our oldest citizens, to ensure they don't just visit this monument, but that they own it. This spring, we're launching the National Ideas Competition, and we aren't just asking architects and historians to design this monument. We're calling on Scouts and every American to tell us exactly what they think this monument should emphasize. And we want to weave all those perspectives into the very fabric of this site. We want, when a girl walks through Constitution Gardens in the years to come, I want her to stand at that monument and feel the same energy that girls feel when they walk through these doors in Savannah. I want her to see that she belongs in the National Mall, she belongs in the halls of power, and she belongs in the future of this country. She should look at the Washington Monument and know she's part of the foundation. She should look at the Lincoln Memorial and know she is part of the Union. And she should look at the Women's Suffrage National Monument and know she is the reason the story continues. But a monument doesn't build itself. The suffragists didn't win the vote by waiting for it to be granted to them. They won it by organizing. They had an unbreakable network of determined women. And so today, I hope I can appeal to you guys to join our network by signing up for our newsletter, following us on social media, and be a booster to tell people about this exciting project that we have finally cleared the pathway to build. Daisy Low once said, "Girl Scouting and girl guiding can be the magic thread that links the youth of the world together." For this monument to reach its full potential, we must ensure that magic thread is pulled tight by the determined women of today. Our success of this monument depends on it. The women who built this house in Savannah and the women who fought for the vote in Washington were fueled by the same fire. They believed that women were not meant to be sheltered, but empowered. They believe that our history is not something that happened to us, but something we create together. Let us use these values of the suffrage movement and the Girl Scouts to link Americans in this country together, and let us honor the friendships that built this house and the persistence that will build this monument. Thank you, and I'd love to take questions and talk more about the monument and orient folks to what we're doing. Do you want to do questions? Or okay, perfect. Just to kind of give y'all a little, this monument was authorized by Congress in 2020, which was the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. Congress got together and like, we need to make sure that this history is honored somewhere in Washington, D.C. At that time, how all our monuments were built, which I did not realize, is Congress says we authorize federal land, but they direct a nonprofit to go do the building of it. So you build it, you design it, you fundraise for it, and then you turn it over to the National Park Service, and it becomes a national monument once you've built it. So I did not know this before, but that's how all of our national monuments on the National Mall were built, from Washington Monument on. When we started looking in 2020 for where to best locate this monument, we were told we could look anywhere in Washington, D.C. We were told we just couldn't look on the National Mall. They said if you can have any median in the middle of a street, things like that. We were like, that's interesting. Let me tell you about this history. And that just wasn't, they said, well, this mall is full. It's a complete civic work of art, so nothing new can go there. So remember, go look somewhere else. And so we said, well, what is here on the National Mall? We did an audit as an organization. There's an actual technical definition. It's called the Reserve, but it's from the Lincoln up to the Capitol, White House, down to the Jefferson. In that technical reserve space, which we're referring to as the National Mall, there are 40 monuments and memorials, 22 to singular men, 10 to war veterans. There is one to the Boy Scouts. Just saying. The first air mail flight is honored here. None are solely dedicated to American women's contributions to America. Women are depicted in two ways. Eleanor Roosevelt is a statue within FDR's presidential memorial, in his 40-room exhibit in FDR. She is there. And then, luckily, the Vietnam nurses got together and were able to add a third component to the Vietnam War Memorial, which honors the nurses that served in Vietnam. But it's a war memorial and a presidential memorial. None are dedicated to really uplifting women out of the footnotes of history. So this will be the first one. Once we audited that, we took that back to Congress and we said, hey, you need to know that if we don't build this here, this will forever be unchanged because this area is closed for new builds forevermore. And Congress thankfully did say, wow, we've never thought about that, but now that you bring it to our attention, this does seem like a problem we should fix, and we can. So in the most recent Congress, they all got together in another wonderful, actually bipartisan way in both the House and the Senate, and they passed a new bill to basically give this monument an exception to the rule. And that allowed us to actually build and tell this story on the National Mall. And as of December 4th of just a month or so ago, once you get that piece of legislation, you then work with all these planning agencies to decide exactly where your monument's going to go. And I am very excited y'all are really the first one of the groups that we've been able to start kind of telling in detail. But we secured this 2.5 acre land around here. This whole area is called Constitution Gardens. It was dedicated during the bicentennial to celebrate the Constitution. So the only memorial that is in this space, a lot of people that go to DC, as you see, it's right here next to the reflecting bowl. You could throw a baseball from one to the other. But because of this tree line, a lot of people don't even know it's here. And so it is just an area. Vietnam Memorial kind of peeks out right there. You can see the end of the wall. It's right there in the center of history. The only memorial that's there, this tiny island, is a memorial to the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence. And we felt that our memorial being in conversation with that memorial is a really important way for people to understand. Women have been here since the founding. Abigail Adams, said that told her husband as he was writing the Constitution to remember the ladies. So we really thought it was important to ground this in foundational American history and tell the story going out from there. And then just another really fun thing I have to tell this group, since y'all know about voting and stuff. The road right here is Constitution Avenue, and this was not planned. But the road that dead ends to it, where the entrance will be to the Women's Suffrage National Monument, is 19th. So our address is literally 19th in Constitution. So I think it was just meant to be. So thank you guys for letting me be here and talk about it, and I'd love to answer whatever questions anybody has or thoughts. Yes.
So I'm assuming so I was one of the first Park Service employees at Women's Right National Monument.
Yes!
Back in 1983.
Okay, that's incredible.
We had a female superintendent, a female chief for interpretation, and I was the female chief engineer. But I'm assuming you're...
I'm gonna get my picture with you in a little bit. Okay, that's awesome.
My husband was like, we're going to where? But I'm assuming you're doing some coordination with women's rights because that's such an integral part of this whole story to tie it all in.
1,000%. Yes,
I think a lot of people don't know about
this is one of the
monument.
only parks dedicated fully, really, to women's history in the National Park System. Yes, we will, and we work with them regularly. You know, Seneca Falls was an area that she's mentioning that this was really a hotbed of activity. Because you had all this going on, this is where women got together and actually wrote down and said, what are we going to do about this? And we tell this story that in 1848, the first cornerstone for the Washington Monument was laid in July 1848. That is the same month and year that women gathered in Seneca Falls to write down and wrote the Declaration of Sentiments, saying we want the right to vote. So on this, you can't see it, and I should have, but the backdrop here, this is the best view of the Washington Monument y'all will ever see. It's amazing. But we really think that's an important context. No wonder women were left out of the conversation. When they built the Washington Monument, we were property. There was no, as you were kind of carving out what the National Mall looked like, women's stories were not important. Lincoln was dedicated in 1922. Women had just run the right to vote. This still was not something that people were kind of thinking as we laid out these kind of iconic monuments and memorials. So yes, that Seneca Falls history is a critical, it wouldn't have happened, right, without it. So very cool. Yes?
So what's the approximate time frame, fundraising, and sketches of the monument
Yes.
and so forth?
So that's the really fun part. Once the National Park Service, so when you build a new monument memorial, you can't go in with what you want it to look like. They say you first pick your site because it's going to look so different, right? And there's even just two. This one is a very circular route versus say we had gone here and this is kind of a square. So your design is going to be really dependent upon what your site looks like. So there are requirements. They say get your site first, then design it around those specifics. And the really exciting thing is we have not picked, a lot of memorials, once they get their site, will kind of go to an architect and an architect will design it. But we are really we want to make sure that everybody has a chance to participate in this. So we are doing Vietnam Wall was the last open design competition that this country really did, truly open, for these monuments and memorials. And so in Maya Lin, a young grad student, was someone that would not normally be able to participate in submitting a design, submitted her design, and obviously it's a pretty iconic and moving memorial. So our hope is that when we launch this National Ideas Competition in March of this year for Women's History Month, that everybody across the nation will dream up and there will be some seed of an idea that we can turn into a monument. So we don't know exactly what it will look like, and I kind of love that. I think we will then take those ideas, we'll gather them. There may be one that you can actually, you have to turn it into this like engineering structure. So I don't know what exactly will come out of that, but those ideas will influence what the final design looks like. And so we are hopeful that process will take about a year. We want to make sure that's a pretty open, transparent process and people are able to look at pictures of the site. They can go visit there. They can dream about what the first monument to women's history would look like, who should be honored, how should we honor them, and think about the stories told on our National Mall. Have conversations with their mothers or grandmothers about that so they can really, this is a good way, we feel like, for people to start thinking about that history and think about carrying that forward. So once it is designed, the not fun part, we got to go back to all the regulatory agencies to get approval, but we'll do that. So we're thinking that groundbreaking is in about 5 years if we really press, I would assume that once we get the design, then you have to, I think it'll take a couple years to build it. So we aren't putting a finish line on it now, but we aren't waiting. Once we kind of get this design going and fundraise and do all the fundraising, then we will start building. We're hoping to program this site, though now that this is our land, we're really hoping to use the process of building it as just a different way to start telling this story. So that's starting with this National Ideas Competition, which everybody can start participating in as soon as March if you have ideas. And you can submit lots of ideas. I was telling them earlier, my kids have already submitted just lots of ideas already. So please, other people submit, so it's just not my kids. But does anybody go up to DC? Is everybody familiar with this area? So I would definitely, we just put out a newsletter today. The day after we got our site, it was snowing, it was raining, we were very tired, but we went and took a jumping picture, just claiming our spot. But we would love to see just people walking down there, being there, just really thinking about what this story means to them and how you would want to communicate that in a monument, which is more than a statue, right? We're going to take up some space on the National Mall. Yes.
Is there any signage on the spot that if you were there that you would know what it was?
No, because the Park Service, until you actually have raised all the money and you have your construction permit, you cannot have signage.
It says future home.
No, I joked, and but I joked on the signage. Maybe I'll just put magnets on the Wayfinder things. Just go out every morning and put that. No, so that's part of it is spreading engagement and awareness about that. So we're kind of saying, okay, that's a challenge, that's hard, but how do we just start spreading this message to tell people this is coming and get excited, and we're gonna have to do that on our own. I wish we'll probably do some programming, throughout the year to do things to activate the site, but they have to be temporary until we build the actual monument.
Sounds like you need an app with the phone would go like this and it would go.
100%. I mean, I think we'd love to think about things like that. And we were talking, the Girl Scouts are coming up for their convention next year. What are ways in the process of building this? How do we send people down here and interact with the site even before the monument's built? I think that'll be as much fun as the permanent monument when it's done. So so share the news, share the pictures of the site, dream about it, tell us who should be honored, how they should be honored. When I sit down and start thinking about it, it's pretty fun. So I hope people have fun doing this project with us. So we'll have a whole thing on our website about how to submit pictures. Everybody's things will be featured in a gallery on our website.
It'd be very cool to have a vintage-looking postcard.
Yes.
That's maybe from 1919 that says future home of and a picture of it.
I love that. That is, you're right, we have a something monumental is coming. That's a great idea, the vintage. Oh, and they organize via these postcards, right? So we're going to bring back the postcard. Yes?
I'm not sure if I heard you way back here.
I'm so sorry.
Did you mention Nina Pate?
Yes.
All right, I did not know they were related, but do you know that there is an historic marker, 2 or 4 Nina Pate on Whitaker, Drake, across from the park, towards that park?
No, I did not know that, but I will go walk there tomorrow
Now, why did you
morning.
mention her? What did she, what was her contribution? Did you mention her?
Yes, she was kind of talking about how, when you're trying to figure out how Daisy was thinking about the vote, that she was saying we need to teach women how to think, not necessarily what to think. And I just thought that was so illustrative of, this wasn't for one political party. They weren't thinking about it. I feel like it's very reminiscent of how the Girl Scouts, this is, how do you just empower women to be better citizens in whatever kind of way they want to tackle their future. But then Elizabeth showed me, I saw Nina Pape's portrait upstairs too, which that was neat to see her depicted. So it was very cool. Yes?
So you mentioned the idea contest, but is there a set list of women or organizations you're looking to honor with this monument, or is it just kind of a free-for-all?
That's a great question. So the way that it is technically, the congressional authorization tells us that the story is the fight for the 19th Amendment. We have some liberty in what that is. We are very much, we are going to tell a big and full and broad story. And so I think that'll be really interesting to see how that comes into design. As we talked about, a lot of monuments and memorials are to singular people, so they can put a statue of someone up there and call it a day. Interesting enough, we talked to the architect who built the Martin Luther King Memorial, and he was saying they wrestled with this same question. Do they build one, do they actually depict Martin Luther King, or do they try to honor a movement at large? And they felt like Martin Luther King was such a symbol of the movement that he could do that. I think that would be harder with this. There were millions of women collectively engaged in this. This isn't, the leaders, of course, are important, but they were just as important as everybody else that fought for this. It was 72 years of the formal battle, from Elizabeth Cady Stanton sitting down there in Seneca Falls writing that down to 1920. So that's a lot of history. And so that'll be a question that I'm interested to see how an artist and how people are thinking about that, because it very much was a collective movement. So we don't have that answer yet, but I think that's going to be a really interesting part of the ideas competition is what people resonate with the audience, or is it more of the collective joining, and that is what resonates with people and some of those values of the suffrage movement. So I would say stay tuned for that, and I hope lots of people think about that, because I think this monument will look different than a lot of our other monuments that are there on the mall.
Yes.
So it'll be potentially an outdoor space?
Yes.
Not necessarily just a building or something?
Correct. It is definitely an outdoor space. We specifically loved Constitution Gardens because it's already a beautiful space. And so we hope to kind of almost activate, it's almost a park-like environment. We would really like people to come be here for 3 hours. Good news, there's also a restroom over there, which is really huge. We wanted people to feel safe and to come visit and stay a while. So the monument will be on kind of wrapping this side of the lake, but we're hoping that it really starts to activate the whole area. And we feel very lucky. The nonprofit partner that works with the Park Service to manage the mall, the Trust for the National Mall, they have identified this whole area as an area they want to, they are currently fundraising to redo and kind of make more beautiful. And so we are really working collaboratively with them. They are adding new trees and new soil and new plantings. And so we will kind of come in and think about how to build that out and make this a space that's welcoming. And it will have to be some sort of, it has to stand up to the elements, kind of like the other monuments and memorials. So there'll be some sort of build. What that looks like, if that's stone and granite or something else, that's still very much up in the air. Mm-hmm.
You still have to do your own fundraising. There's no allocation of funds from the government.
Correct. It is all private funds in our legislation. That is how it is. We accept no federal funds, no government money. And I actually think that's awesome. I want this to be a monument that we do for the American people. And I think some monuments and memorials have received federal funds, and some especially that started and then couldn't raise the rest of their funds. But we are privately raising funds, and that is how we're going to do it.
So do you have a sense of what previous monuments have raised in terms of finances?
Yes. So we have set a number. Our goal is to raise $150 million, and that number is contingent on what other ones were. So Martin Luther King it's the most recent one. It was the last one built on the National Mall, and it was $120 in, I think that was 08. $120 million in $08. And so we were thinking something. So until we have our final design, we won't know. But we don't want this to be. This is probably the only monument we're going to get to women's history on the mall. And so we would like to do the work we need to do to make a statement with this. Yes.
So you may have mentioned this, and I might have just missed it, but when you said that Congress in 2020, made the decision to have a monument to the suffrage movement, did somebody like your group request this legislation, or did they think of it on their own?
Great question, and very sophisticated question. Congress did not think of it on its own. It's actually a really neat story. There is a group, two ladies in Colorado, got together. This was also the time, do you remember, in Central Park, they were doing a new suffrage statue as well. So they were kind of talking about this, and that was that's kind of when this new research came around, kind of who are we depicting, what are we depicting, what are the stories we're telling in these monuments. So these two women in Colorado, they found out that the Central Park statue, they had kind of thought about what, should we do something in Central Park, and then that one took on a life of its own, and they said, well, there should be something in DC. That's crazy that there's not here. So they went to their local congressman, Congressman Neguse in Colorado. He was a first-term congressman at the time, and he was motivated by this. He introduced a bill, and then our commission got involved, and we wanted to make sure it was a bipartisan, bicameral. This is just a good for everyone. So we were thankfully able to find widespread support in 2020, and then so it felt like Congress was very proud of themselves once they did it, but it was not their initial idea. So great question. Yes. Oh, sorry. You go and then we'll go behind you. Perfect.
Were there any specific congressional supporters, officials?
Absolutely. That's actually one of my favorite parts of this is we always say, so we try to keep this, so our current, two things to say on that. Our honorary chairs are all the living first ladies, which if you think about that is pretty wild. This is the only organization that they voluntarily serve together on. And so we say if you can have Melania Trump and Hillary Clinton stand up in support of something, we want to spread. That is the message we want to spread. And that is also witnessed in our congressional support. So we have, I'm guessing people probably know a lot about politics in here, but in the Senate, we had 2 women senators who were our main supporters for this, and they came from opposite ends of the political spectrum. We had Senator Baldwin on one side and Senator Blackburn on the other. And this may not surprise folks, but it was actually, there were a couple senators that did not want this bill to pass. They did not think that we should build on the National Mall for this history. And so those 2 women had to go down to the floor of the Senate and actually ask for a voice vote to come over those objections. And they went down together to do that, and they took up 30 minutes on the Senate floor. I don't know that they've ever gotten together in any other policy issue, but they were really proud of coming together on this. So I think that's that is a thread we hope to carry out throughout this whole project, is again, kind of like here, all voices are welcome here. And so it is about empowering women to use their voice. Yes. Oh, and then and I'll come back to you. I'm so sorry.
Is there any anticipation for pushback with the current administration or future administration? And then is there a game plan for what are we going to do if that happens?
Yes. Great question. We are kind of this unicorn project. So I'm really thankful it actually worked out this way. So that first bill in 2020, if we recall, so the president who signed that was President Trump at the time. And then our second bill, President Biden signed it. And so we're trying, somehow they all just have agreed that this is the thing that they'll support right now. It's obviously a crazy time to be doing this in the world. There are a lot of things to think about, but I think that's just, we're trying to be really thoughtful about that and engaging with people. And so far, we've been 4 years in this work, and a lot of other projects haven't, especially DC-centric, have had a harder time. And this one, I think it's just too much of a good thing. I think that people know, I think when you walk around the mall, I think people are like, 250 years, if we're celebrating the 250th, it's probably it's time for women's contributions to be honored. So I'm hopeful that will carry us through this. Great question. Yes, and I'm so sorry, come back to you.
I know you stated that you were wanting us, the people, to come up with the design for this monument. Mm-hmm. Is there a specific time frame in which you were wanting to break ground and have this accomplished by?
Yes, so it's a little dependent on a lot of things. So that's what we say right now. We have a timeline that is in 5 years. Say that the monument took longer to build, that, we don't want to limit people by saying that. So I think right now design will take a year. And so when we launch this in March, that kind of opens up this next phase of the project, which is design. And so once we finish and figure out what this design is, which is really a national conversation, I hope. I hope this is, I hope people get engaged, and really showcase how they think about what this monument could be. So once we get that design, I think we have 4 years after that of completing the funds, getting the engineering drawings done, getting that through approval, and before we would have our big celebration. Which we will have a big celebration. So everybody, in our heads, we are shutting down the National Mall for a big 3-day celebration once this thing is unveiled. So I think it'll be, yes, these are going to be a couple of exciting years, but we're trying to lean into monuments. Just take a lot of these monuments, if you compare, can take up to 20 years. That's not abnormal. We are not trying to wait around for that to happen. So we're trying to just go through each step as quickly, but not limit we don't want to limit the right thinking about this. So that's why my answer is a little weird on that. Thoughts? Yes.
Somewhat related.
Yes.
This morning I read on Savannah Morning News, whose parent company is USA Today, that they're looking for nominations for the 250 women who shaped America. And it sounds to me like Juliette Gordon Low would be an excellent candidate, or perhaps a new name to me, maybe George Williams.
Love that. And y'all said that you had done a program about her. Yes, so I would like to, as I was researching the speech, she is another one that I think that should be 100% uplifted in this. So I love that that's how you're thinking about that. And I do think this is it's a time, we speak to a lot of classrooms from elementary to college. We try, the lesson is different, but a lot of people do get the 250th in reflecting back on, wait, women have been here all along. We always push kids to say, okay, when you're reading about that event, always ask, where were the women in that? And so it is a time that I think as a society, we're a little more reflective over what stories we're telling. And that's why I'm so thankful we are able to have this design competition during the 250th. I think those two things paired together is a great time for us as a nation to be thinking about who we're honoring and what those people are. And then there's other ways, we're not a museum, we're a monument. We know that we're not, I think most people, when we do polls, Susan B. Anthony is the name most people recognize as a suffragist. That's the one they were probably taught about. But also, I don't think many people would know if we built a statue of Susan B. Anthony, what Susan B. Anthony even looked like, right? It's not like a Lincoln where people remember that. So I think we have a lot of education to do during the building of this. Who were all these women? And really understanding there were leaders of the movement. They had their own baggage too, but there's a lot in this story that we think is really exciting. And my favorite is to talk to high school girls about this because they just find this story so empowering. And they say it ignites their curiosity to go back to and say, who else don't I know about? What other women in my town? Who, please tell me more now that you've finally opened up and women have been doing great things since the beginning. I want to know more. So I'm hoping for lots of ideas like that. Who in your local area, and I was saying another project one of our partner groups has taken on is, okay, let's change that number on the National Mall to make sure women are recognized there. But they are also then taking it on in their own personal organization and asking their chapters to go in their local area and figure out what women were in their local chapters that need to be uplifted in their history and rename streets, rename bridges. What are other ways that you can be uplifting women in your own areas? And so I think that will also be an exciting part. We're kind of hoping this is the spark that ignites a lot of those conversations around the country.
Do we have a suffragette badge?
We'll work on that, right? Maybe. Okay, I don't know if I'm allowed. But we did in 2020, we partnered with the Girl Scouts as a commission, and we did a suffrage patch. So I'm hoping there's a starter seed of something that we could talk about because there's some good lessons. There's so many similarities that I think. So stay tuned for more brainstorming on that.
So, you're going to build the monument.
Yes, we're going to build the monument.
We're all going to come for the 3-day party.
Yes, you are. Yes.
And then what will happen to the foundation? Will you shift to programming and continue outreach?
That is a great question. Y'all are so sophisticated in these things. So we we are unique in we are a nonprofit created solely to do this. Some monuments and memorials it is a part of their larger mission. So like for Martin Luther King, it was part of his fraternity. So this was one of the fraternity as an organization took on the building of this. They were kind of the developer of that. We only exist to build this monument, and then we had actually hoped to go away. But in recent conversations, the Park Service says actually the most successful monuments stay on as friends of, so that you can take care of your monument, program the monument. So we haven't made any decisions, but I think obviously the long-term programming of this is where it also gets very exciting. And it's something we would definitely love to keep talking to partner groups, to make sure that if it's us or someone else, that someone stays around, that builds a bookshop with all sorts of women's history books around here. There's a lot more. We're hoping this is the first of a lot of reimagining how we're telling our story. So that's a great question. But for right now, only job, build this, turn it over, and go from there.
Thank you, Kimberly.
Thank you all so much for